Okay, so the first example that we're going to work on is to completely factor the following polynomials. So let's do example 1a. 6a plus 8. So first we're going to be looking at the coefficients, and we write down 6 and 8, and we look at all the factors of 6. Well, we could get 3 times 2 to be 6, or 6 times 1, but we usually don't keep the number again on its own, so just 3 times 2. Now for 8, we can write this as 4 times 2. So what it means to be a common factor is that number should appear on both of them. So if you see here, they are both divisible by 2. So what does it mean to be divisible? Well, if you take the number 8, if you divide it by 2, it will give you a whole number. So 8 divided by 2 will be 4. And in the other case, if you have 6 divided by 2, that has to give you a whole number as well. In this case, it does. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that's what we mean by divisible by when we're trying to find the common factors. So in this case, the greatest common factor was 2. So the expression 6a plus 8, and in this case there are only one variable, so a will not be common to the two terms, so it's only common to one term, so that cannot be factored out. So the only factor that we can take out is a 2. So we're going to open up the brackets. 2 times what will give us back 6a? Well, that's going to be 2 times 3a. So we kind of have to check by thinking backwards a moment. So to make sure that we factor correctly, we could quickly expand so we can check. What's 2 times 3a? Well, that's 6a, so that's correct. That means we're good. So let's continue on. Then we want to figure out what number times 2 will give us back 8. Well, that's 4. Again, how do we check? We can just quickly expand in our minds. 2 times 4 will give us back 8. So that is correct. Alright, let's keep going. Now we're going to have some different examples. We're doing 9n squared minus 12n. Right away you notice that we have an n squared and an n. So the lowest power is n to the power of 1. So since that's common between the two of them, we always factor out the lowest power of the variable. So here we have n. Then we need to look at the coefficients, so the constant terms. 9 and 12. Well, what are all the multiples of 9? We can have 9 times 1, 3 times 3, 9 times 1, and that's about it. Whereas for 12, we can have 4 times 3, 6 times 2, and that's about it. So now we want to find out which term was common between the two of them, and we should be looking for the greatest number. So if we compare for 9 and 12, the greatest common factor in this case would be the number 3. So since they have that in common, we could factor it out. 3n. Open up your brackets. 3n times what will give you back 9n squared? Well, 3 times 3 is 9, and n times n will be n squared. So how do you check? Quickly do the expansion in your head. 3n times 3n will be 9n squared. Good. Now let's look at the next part. 3n times what will give us back 12n? That will be negative 4. Again, you should get into the habit of doing a quick check. 3n times negative 4, that is negative 12n. So we're doing it correctly. Alright, so the questions do get a little bit harder, so let's try out the other ones. in this case, when we look at all three terms, we notice that they have p in common, and when we're factoring up variables, you always take the lowest power. So in this case, it will be p to the power of 1. Then you look at the constants. So we have 4, 6, and 2. 2 is already the lowest, so you cannot find another number because it's already a prime. 6 can be written as 2 primes, 3 times 2. And 4 is 2 times 2. So what is the greatest common factor? Will be 2 itself. So let's factor out 2p. Then we open up our brackets. So again, we have to kind of work backwards to check. 2p times what will give us negative 4p cubed. So that would be 2p times negative 2p squared. Again, quickly check. 2p times negative 2p squared, negative 4p cubed. So we're good. 2p times what will give us 6p squared? Well, that would be positive 3p. And the last part, 2p is already factored out, so now it has to be plus 1. Let me just erase this so it's not too confusing. Okay, right, because 2p times 1 is 2p. So that's as much as we can factor out this polynomial. All right, it seems like the questions are getting more challenging. Let's keep going. All right, so again, first we look at the variables. So they all have an x in common, and then we always look for the lowest power of that variable. So it's going to be to the power of x. So we're going to put that on the left side of our equation. And we look at the next variable. Oh, they all have y's. But again, we always pick out the lowest power of that variable. So it'd be y. Normally we look at the coefficients, but here all of them are just 1, 1, and then the other one's 4. So it's just greatest common factor of 1. Open up your brackets. So then you think backwards. xy times what will give you 4xy squared. So that'll be 4y. Again, quickly check. xy times 4y will be 4xy squared. So it's correct. Good. The next part, xy times what will give us negative x cubed y. So that has to be a negative x squared. You could do the checking for yourself. And the next part would be negative x. And now we fully factor it out. So you should be in the habit of checking each one to see that it works. That way you're guaranteed to be correct once the test comes around, okay? Okay, we have 2 questions left in this video, so let's finish it up. All right, 4n squared plus 9m squared. In this case, the variables are not common, so we cannot factor them out. So then we focus our attention on the coefficients. 4 and 9. What are the factors of 4? 2 times 2, that's about it. For 9, we have 3 times 3. And that's it. So in this case, they don't have a common factor, and they don't have a common variable. So it turns out that this question all along was already fully factorable, so cannot factor. You often try to get some tricky question like this from your teacher. They'll make sure that you know what you're doing, so don't think that you're wrong. Sometimes you're not able to factor out any further. Okay, so let's do the last question now. So in this case, again, we look at the variables first. We have n squared and n cubic. Well, what is the lowest power? N squared. So we put that at the left side of our equation. Then you're going to look at the constants, 4 and 9. Again, 9, 3 times 3, those are the only prime numbers, and 4 is 2 times 2. So in this case, there is no common factor between 4 and 9. So there's no number that can divide both of them into a whole number. So the only thing we could have factored out was the n squared in this case. So now let's complete our factoring. So n squared times what will give us 4n squared. That's 4. Quickly check. N squared times 4, 4n squared. Good. And n squared times what will give us 9n cubic. That would be 9n. Wow, great. So that's how you're going to apply factoring by greatest common factor when you're looking at terms. Make sure you're looking at the variable first, then you look at the numbers to find the greatest common factor right on the left side. And a good strategy is to always be checking your work when you want to find out what number will be multiplied by. Some teachers, like in my worksheet itself, will ask you to divide, but I prefer to think of it as multiplication. I hope this works for you, and then stay tuned to the next video. Thank you.